Welcome back to Nostalgic Nights. I'm your host, Nine Lives, and tonight we'll be going back in time to take a deep dive into some of the best video games of 1992. We will be reviewing and revisiting some all-time classics, breaking down and analyzing their significant importance and impact on the video game world. The year is 1992. The gaming industry is on fire. The console wars aren't just happening in corporate boardrooms no more. They're being fought in arcades, living rooms, and schoolyards across the world. Nintendo, once the undisputed king of the video game industry, still dominates Japan with an iron grip. But elsewhere, the battle rages on. In North America, in Europe, and in South America, the war is very much real. Kids are choosing sides, Team Nintendo or Team Sega. There is no neutral ground, there is no peace, just pixelated combat. But something was changing. For the first time in years, Nintendo was feeling the pressure. Sega was no longer the underdog, it was a real competitor. And as 1992 unfolds, it becomes clear the balance of power is shifting. Nintendo knows it needs to act fast to counter Sega's growing presence. They slashed the price of the Super Nintendo, making it more accessible to the masses. But Sega isn't just backing down. They strike back, lowering the price of the Genesis. The battle wasn't just about the best video games anymore. It was about making these consoles a must-have item in every home. The war was heating up, and for the first time, Nintendo's hold over the industry was beginning to loosen. By the end of 1992, the Super Nintendo had outsold the Genesis, but the numbers tell a different story. Just 2 years ago, Nintendo controlled 90% of the market. Now, they had slipped to just 45%. Sega's rise was undeniable, and the gaming landscape was changing, and the war was far from over. In the mix of all this, there's an issue of exclusivity. Nintendo's tight licensing agreement prevented developers from releasing the same game on both consoles. But where there's a will, there's a way. Clever developers find loopholes, modifying their games just enough to avoid legal troubles. The result? Gamers get different versions of their favorite titles depending on which console they own. Mortal Kombat, Aladdin, and Street Fighter 2 all became battlegrounds in this war, with each console getting its own unique take. Sega also had another trick up its sleeve: timing. With its Western dominance growing, Sega starts releasing games in North America and Europe before Japan. It was a bold strategy that kept Genesis fans one step ahead, with fresh titles dropping regularly, while Nintendo players were left waiting. Meanwhile, Nintendo's biggest strength was its polished library, which also became its biggest weakness. Translation, localization, and adaptation slowed down releases. While Sega fans were already diving into Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Streets of Rage 2, and Shining Force, SNES fans were patiently waiting for games like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario Kart. For the first time, Nintendo was on defense. Sega's strategy was paying off in 1992. Their aggressive marketing and strong release schedule gave them the strongest position yet. But they weren't just competing with Nintendo, they were winning in key territories. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Streets of Rage 2, and Toe Jam and Earl were games that defined the Genesis experience, and they arrived before Nintendo could counter. While Sega might have had the momentum, Nintendo still had the long game in mind. 1992 marks a turning point in gaming history, the year where the once invincible Nintendo felt the impact of a true rival. The year where Sega proved it was here to stay. But who would emerge victorious? Would Sega's aggressive, fast-paced strategy be enough to overthrow the king? Or would Nintendo's timeless franchises and calculated approach prove superior in the long run? Well, to answer these questions for you, we put a list together of some of the best video games of 1992. The early 90s was dominated by fighting games. Street Fighter 2 had set the gold standard for one-on-one combat, but Midway Games had something different in mind. Co-created by Ed Boon and John Tobias, Mortal Kombat wasn't just another fighting game. It was darker, grittier, and more cinematic than anything before it. Unlike its competitors, it didn't use pixel art or hand-drawn animations. Instead, it used digitized actors, making every punch, every kick, and fatality feel shockingly real. The game introduced us to 7 playable characters, each with their own backstories and rivalries. Liu Kang, the Destined Hero, Johnny Cage, the cocky Hollywood martial artist, Sonya Blade, the relentless special force officer, and of course, the 2 masked warriors who would become legends, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. But what truly set Mortal Kombat apart was its brutal fights. The fights weren't just about winning, they were about humiliating your opponent with a fatality. And for the first time in gaming history, the violence was pushed to the extreme.
On Capitol Hill, the focus was on video games, amid complaints that some of them promote the very thing that most people are trying to prevent. Video game manufacturers today issued something of a preemptive strike aimed at keeping violent and sexual images away from kids. NBC's John Cochran now.
The makers of some video games promote them as a way that guys can show how tough they are. But today, the game makers themselves blinked. Under pressure from an angry Congress and angrier parents, game makers offered a new rating system. GA for general audiences, all ages. MA13, okay for teens, but not younger kids. And MA17 for 17-year-olds and older. The timing of the peace offering was no accident. Just an hour later, the Senate...
What we're talking about. What you're about to see are scenes from two of the most violent new video games. First, we have Mortal Kombat, which is a martial arts contest involving digitized characters. We're going to show two versions of the game. In the first segment, which is Sega's version, blood splatters from the contestants' heads. When a player wins, the so-called death sequence begins. The game narrator instructs the player to finish, and I quote, finish his opponent. The player may then choose a method of murder, ranging from ripping a heart out to pulling off the head of the opponent with spinal cord attached. The second version, made by Nintendo, leaves out the blood and decapitation, but as you will see, it is still a violent game. For a lot of you to see, but there's blood splattering every time.
Kato wins. Flawless victor fatality. Sub-Zero win fatality.
And this is a brief sequence from the Nintendo version. Now, the difference there, as you can see, is that that version does not have the finishing sequences, the death sequences, and in fact, instead of red blood spurting out, there's some other liquid, but it doesn't look like blood.
Martial arts game, as some parents think is just too violent for their kids. Carol Lynn joins us live now from Northridge with more on that story. Carol?
Here it is, Bob, behind me. It's called Mortal Kombat, and we're going to talk to Aaron Brandis here about the game. Aaron, how does it work?
Well, basically, you pick a couple characters, you do maneuvers on the joystick, some buttons, you do moves, and
then what are you trying to get to? Fatalities?
Nah, there's a master guy you got to beat at the end. Fatalities are just what happens if you're really brutal to your opponent. You get an opponent, you can rip off his head or something like that.
Sounds like a pretty thrilling game, and this is the kind of violence that critics are pretty worried about. Cold-blooded murder is making Mortal Kombat the most popular video game in history. Kids relish their victory and their bloody
with this
choice.
innovation,
Should
it
they
came a
pull out their
backlash.
opponent's
The
heart,
realistic gore
or
and
simply rip
fatalities
his
had
head
caught
off
the
just to see
attention
his
of
spinal
parents,
cord dangle in a
politicians,
pool of
and
blood?
even
How
the
do you feel
media.
about cutting his
Suddenly,
head
video
off?
games were under scrutiny like never before.
After a $10
Mortal
million
Kombat became the prime
advertising
example of
campaign,
games
Mortal Kombat,
corrupting the
debuting
youth,
in home
leading
video
to
today,
congressional hearings
is
that would
expected to
forever
sell
change
2
the
million
industry.
copies
The
at
result, the
$50
formation
a
of the
pop.
ESRB,
Horrifying
the
possibility
Entertainment
for
Software
parents who
Rating
can't
Board,
believe
a
the
system that
filmmakers
still
are
determines
fantasizing
game
about
ratings today.
decapitation and
Despite or
murder.
perhaps because of the controversy, Mortal Kombat became a cultural icon. It spawned sequels, movies, and even comics, and a dedicated fan base that kept the franchise alive for over 30 years. The gameplay, the characters, and the iconic Get Over Here are now legendary. What began as a small arcade experiment turned into one of the most successful, influential fighting franchises of all time. Love it or hate it, there's no denying Mortal Kombat changed the video game industry forever. It pushed boundaries and challenged norms and fought literally and figuratively for its place in gaming history. And in the end, it didn't just survive, it dominated. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do.
Wait until they get out
check
in
it
a
out.
situation where they're fighting, and then they'll think about this and try to make it real.
But you know, game makers are saying that games are going to become more visually violent and more sexually violent as adults buy more video games. I mean, it's a big money market, $50 to $60 a pop. Plus, some of the critics say, or they at least concede, that parents have to be there in order to pay for the game, so at least there's some discretion there. And game makers are also talking about a new rating system similar to the movies. We'll see what happens. I'm Carol Lynn reporting live from Northridge. Back to you.
Released in 1992 and developed by Climax Entertainment and Sonic Software Planning, Shining Force was a turn-based combat strategy RPG that broke new grounds with its grid-based combat, engaging storytelling, and a massive roster of unique characters. Unlike many RPGs at the time that focused on random encounters and grinding, Shining Force put strategy front and center, challenging players to think tactically about every move and attack strategically. One of Shining Force's biggest strengths was its characters, from the brave swordsman Max to the fiery mage Kyo and the steadfast knight Ken. Every unit in your army had their own personality, class, and playstyle. And the best part, you could recruit a diverse mix of warriors, archers, and centaurs, and even werewolves. This gave players plenty of options to build a unique army that suited their strategy. But Shining Force wasn't just about battles. It had a world that felt alive. Between fights, players could explore towns, talk to NPCs, find hidden items, and even recruit secret characters. This added a layer of immersion that wasn't common in tactical RPGs at the time. The story, while built on classic fantasy tropes, kept players engaged with its well-placed progression and twists that kept you invested in Max's journey. The influence of Shining Force on the gaming world is undeniable. It helped popularize the tactical RPG genre as we know it today, paving the way for later classics like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics. Its blend of strategic gameplay and RPG mechanics became a blueprint for countless games that followed. So, is Shining Force still worth playing today? Absolutely. Whether you're a longtime fan or discovering it for the first time, this game is a must-play for anyone who loves strategy, RPGs, or just great storytelling in general. It's a reminder of how innovative the 16-bit era truly was. But what do you think? Have you played Shining Force before, or do you plan on giving it a shot? Let us know in the comments down below. Beneath the surface of the ocean lies a world unknown, a place of beauty, wonder, and danger. A world where the silence is as vast as the sea itself, where every shadow could be a lurking predator, and where survival is an endless struggle. It was in this world that one of the most unique, unforgettable video games of all time was born. It defined expectations, blending the tranquility of searching the ocean with an unexpected challenge. One that tested patience, skill, and in the very limits of what players thought a game could be. Its story was mystery, hunting, and deeply emotional. It took players on a journey not just through the ocean's depths, but across time and space itself. It was mesmerizing, and it was also terrifying. In the early 90s, platformers dominated the gaming landscape, but Edu Zanatti, a game designer at Sega, had a vision, one like anything before it. Instead of a cartoonish mascot or a typical side-scrolling adventure, he wanted players to experience the ocean as a living, breathing world, inspired by real dolphin behavior, marine biology, and even extraterrestrial theories. At first glance, Echo the Dolphin seemed like a peaceful exploration of the ocean's wonders. Players control Echo, a bottlenose dolphin, navigating through the coral reefs, caves, and underwater ruins. But beneath its tranquil exterior lies a game that was brutally different. Air was a constant concern, forcing players to resurface to breathe. Enemies lurked every corner, from sharks to jellyfish to even deadly underwater currents. And then the game takes a turn for the worse. What started as a simple journey to reunite with Echo's lost pod became something much darker, a battle against an ancient alien force known as the Vortex. Players were no longer just exploring the ocean. They were traveling through time, unlocking cryptic messages and preparing for a showdown against the extraterrestrial horror. One of the Echo's Dolphin's greatest strengths was its atmosphere. The hunting ambient soundtrack, composed by Spencer Nilsson, added an eerie loneliness to the experience. Unlike the upbeat soundtracks of most of the game's games had. At the time, Echo's music was a mystery, at times peaceful, at times deeply unsettling. Every level was designed to make players feel small and vulnerable, reinforcing the game's theme of isolation, survival, and vastness of the ocean. And that's what made Echo so unique. It wasn't just a game, it was an experience. Upon release, Echo the Dolphin was praised for its innovation, stunning graphics, and atmospheric storytelling. But what also divides some players were captivated by its challenge and mystery. Others were frustrated by its punishing difficulty, and yet, despite its mixed reception, Echo still was a cult classic, spawning sequels, a fan base, and even rumors of a revival. To this day, Echo the Dolphin remains one of the most unique and thought-provoking games of its time. It wasn't just about defeating enemies or completing levels, it was about survival and exploring the mysteries of the ocean and having the feeling of being lost in something much bigger than yourself. It was a game that asked players to listen and to observe and embrace the unknown. And for those who dared to take the journey, Echo the Dolphin was an unforgettable one. And I suggest, if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do go check it out.
Taking the best elements from Lucasfilm Limited Star Wars movie,
Released
the
in
engaging
1992
heroes,
for the
the
Super
horrific
Nintendo
aliens,
Entertainment
the
System,
terrorizing
Super Star Wars
Imperial
brought the
forces,
epic adventure
the
of A New
thrilling
Hopes of
flying
Life
and
in a
fighting,
fast-paced,
the
action-packed
strange settings,
platformer.
and the
Unlike many
mystifying
movie-based
powers
games
of
of the
the
time,
Force,
Super
and
Star Wars
adding
didn't simply retell a
interactivity.
story through static
Players can choose to be
cutscenes.
Luke
It threw players
Skywalker,
right into the
Han
action
Solo,
with
or
high-energy
Chewbacca
running
to
gun
do battle
gameplay,
with the dark
vehicle
side of the
sequences, and
Force,
even
and
large-scale
determine the fate of
battles.
the galaxy.
Players to control
Super
Luke
Star
Skywalker,
Wars
Han
features
Solo, and
14
even
levels,
Chewbacca,
each crammed
with their
with
own
huge
unique
detailed
abilities as they
graphics
blasted
and
through
smooth,
familiar locations like
realistic
Tatooine
animation.
Desert, the
Super
Death Star,
Star
and
Wars
even the
is
trenches of the
a
final
hit.
battle, from
From the
battling
burning
Jawas
deserts of
to Tusken
Tatooine,
Raiders to
the
taking down the
maze-like
mighty
interior
Scarlet
of a
Pit
sand
monster.
crawler,
The
the
game
Mos
combines
Eisley
Star Wars
Bar, to
iconic
your
settings
final
with intense
confrontation with the
side-scrolling
awesome
combat,
Death
which
Star.
made it a thrilling
All the
experience
action
for
from the
fans of the
movie is here,
franchise.
but the
What made
outcome is
Super
up to
Star
you.
Wars also
Do you
stand
have
out
what
was
it
its
takes to
impressive
take on the
graphics,
Empire?
tight
Find
controls,
out
and
with
relentless
Super Star
difficulty.
Wars,
It
available
may
now.
not hold up today, but the game's fluid animation and detailed sprite work captured the essence of the Star Wars universe. And while its fast-paced action and punishing enemies kept players on their toes, the variety of gameplay of switching between blaster shooting action, lightsaber combat, and even exhilarating vehicle levels like the land speeder, the X-Wing missions, it helped keep the experience fresh and dynamic. While its difficulty was notorious, requiring precision platforming and quick reflexes, Super Star Wars became a fan favorite and a staple of the SNES library. It has successfully translated the excitement of A New Hope into an intense gaming experience, paving the way for its sequels, Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi. It cemented a legacy as one of the best Star Wars games of its era. And I suggest if you haven't tried this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Check it out. In the realm of forgotten classics, buried beneath the shadow of giants, lies a game that dared to bring something different to the RPG landscape of the early 90s. A game that blended high fantasy with the unique aesthetic of tarot cards, telling a tale of prophecy, betrayal, and magic. This is Arcana, released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Developed by HAL Laboratory, the same company that would later bring us Kirby and Super Smash Bros., Arcana attempted to carve out its own path in the RPG genre. Now, at first glance, its gameplay structure resembles a classic dungeon crawler, like Wizardry, but with a distinct artistic twist. Every character and enemy, even the world itself, was represented as an intricately designed tarot card, setting it apart from traditional sprite-based RPGs of its time. The story follows Rook, a young cardmaster and the last remaining cardmaster of the Kingdom of Elman, as he embarks on a perilous quest to stop an evil organization from reviving a long-forgotten dark power. Along the way, he allies himself with warriors, elemental spirits, and even royalty, battling monstrous foes, uncovering sinister conspiracies hidden within the kingdom's history. And though the plot may follow familiar RPG tropes, its execution and immersive world building gave it a distinct personality. Arcana's battle system took traditional turn-based combat and infused it with a unique card-based aesthetic. Players controlled Rook and his party, engaging in random encounters that required careful planning and resource management. Magic and elemental spirits played a crucial role in combat, adding layers of strategy beyond simple attack and defense mechanics. However, the game's unforgiving nature meant that a single wrong move could lead to a devastating consequence, pushing players to think critically about every decision. One of Arcana's most infamous aspects was its difficulty. Unlike many RPGs of the time, where fallen party members could be easily revived, Arcana took a harsher approach. If Rooks fell in battle, it was instant game over. This, combined with the high encounter rate and limited healing options, made the game a grueling experience, even for RPG veterans. But for those who endured its challenge, Arcana offered a rewarding immersive adventure filled with rich lore and deep tactical gameplay. The world of Arcana was vast, with labyrinth dungeons, cursed castles, and sprawling underground networks teeming with danger. Exploring was both thrilling and treacherous, as players had to balance resource conversion with the need to press forward. The lack of in-game mapping tools made memorization and careful navigation essential, adding an old-school level of challenge that would later be lost in the era of modern convenience. Visually, Arcana stood out with its Terra-inspired art direction. Each character was beautifully designed with bold lines, intricate detailing, reminiscent of traditional playing cards. The game's use of bright, vivid colors against darker dungeon environments created an atmosphere that was both mysterious and engaging. Though its graphical limitations meant a lack of dynamic animation, the static illustrations possessed a charm that kept players invested in the world's mystique. The soundtrack of Arcana, composed by Io Izuaki, who would later become famous for his work on the Kirby series, delivered a hauntingly beautiful score. From the ominous dungeon themes to the triumphant battle anthems, the music perfectly captured the game's sense of wonder and danger. Even today, fans of classic RPGs look back on Arcana's soundtrack as one of the strongest and most memorable features. Decades later, Arcana has found a second life among retro gaming enthusiasts. With the rise of digital preservation and emulation, new players have been able to experience its distinct charm and recognize its influence on later RPGs. While it never achieved the legendary status of Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, its legacy endures as a cult classic and one that dared to experiment and challenge the convenience of its time. Arcana was not the biggest RPG of its era, nor was it the most innovative, but in its own way, it was a game ahead of its time. One that blended mythology, strategy, and an immersive story into one singular unforgettable experience. And for those willing to deep dive into its world, Arcana remains a treasure worth playing. But what do y'all think? Did it deserve an entry on this list? Have y'all played Arcana, or do y'all plan on giving it a shot? Let us know in the comments down below.
Oof, looks like they still pack a punch.
Recently, we compared two superheroes.
In 1992, a small round hero made his debut on the Nintendo Game Boy, capturing the hearts of gamers around the world. He wasn't the sword-wielding hero of a grand fantasy tale, nor was he a speedy blue bird racing across the screen. Instead, he was something different, something simple yet unforgettable. This is Kirby's Dream Land, the game that introduced the world to Nintendo's most iconic puffball. Developed by HAL Laboratory and the legendary Masahiro Sakurai, Kirby's Dream Land was designed with the accessibility in mind. Unlike other platformers of the era, it wasn't about pixel-perfect jumps or punishing difficulty. It was about fun, exploring, and charm. Kirby could float and hail enemies and spit them out as projectiles, making gameplay feel fresh and approachable, especially for newcomers to the genre of platformers at the time. Set in the peaceful land of Dreamland, Kirby embarks on a journey to recover the stolen food of his homeland, which has been taken by the gluttonous King Dedede. This whimsical story was lighthearted yet effective, providing players with a simple but engaging motivation to push forward. From the rolling fields of green greens to the eerie clouds of bubbly clouds, each level was designed to be colorful, creative, and brimming with personality. Even with the limitations of the Game Boy screen of the time, it still worked. And now, at its heart, Kirby's Dream Land was a deceptively simple game. The mechanics were very straightforward, the challenge was obviously manageable, and the adventure was short, yet it worked. Though Kirby's Dream Land lacked the copyability that would later define the franchise, it laid down the foundation for what was to come. For many, Kirby's Dream Land wasn't just another Game Boy game. It was an introduction to a world of joy, creativity, and an endless adventure. It was proof that a game didn't have to be complex nor magical, and for that reason, Kirby Dream Land remains one of the most beloved and enduring classics of the early 90s. The game's bright and cheerful art style, catchy music, and smooth mechanics set the standard for the future of platformers on the Game Boy. Its success led to multiple sequels, and they expanded on Kirby's abilities, most notably Kirby's Adventure from 1993, released on the NES, which introduced his famous copy ability. Dreamland has showcased Nintendo's ability to create a engaging gameplay experience with the limitations of the Game Boy's hardware. While it was a short game that could be completed in under an hour, its charm and accessibility helped establish Kirby as a major Nintendo mascot, ensuring his place in gaming history for decades to come. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Go check it out. Released in 1992 for the NES, Mega Man 5 continued Capcom's iconic Blue Bomber saga with refined gameplay, unique level design, and an intriguing new storyline. This time, the narrative has a surprising twist. Proto Man, Mega Man's own brother, appears to have turned against humanity, leading a new army of 8 robot masters with classic run-and-gun action. Players battle through diverse stages, from the zero-gravity environments of Gravity Man's stage to the fast-moving conveyor belts of Gyro Man's domain. The game also introduced improved animations, more detailed backgrounds, and some of the smoothest gameplay seen in the series. While some critics argue that Mega Man 5 didn't really innovate as much as its predecessors, its refined mechanics and exciting boss battles made it a standout entry in the franchise. One of the biggest refinements in Mega Man 5 was the upgraded Mega Buster. First introduced in Mega Man 4, the charge shot in this game felt more balanced, adding another layer of strategy to combat without making traditional blaster shots obsolete. Level design also saw improvements with more dynamic stage hazards and interactive elements. For example, Starman stage features low gravity, forcing players to rethink their jumps, while Wayman's level introduced an auto-scrolling jet ski section, something rarely seen in previous Mega Man games. The game's difficulty was also slightly toned down compared to Mega Man 3 and 4, making it one of the most accessible entries for newcomers to the franchise, while still providing a solid challenge for veterans of the series. While Mega Man 5 may have not reinvented the formula of the franchise, it successfully built upon the series' strength, offering some of the most polished gameplay on the NES. The soundtrack, as always, was a highlight, with tracks like Gravity Man's theme standing out as some of the best in the franchise. While the Proto Man twist may have not been as shocking in hindsight, it added an extra layer of intriguiness to the story. Some fans might consider Mega Man 5 a safe sequel, but it remains fun, well-crafted platformer that proves why the Mega Man series was one of the best on the NES and one of the most beloved franchises. Whether you're a longtime fan or new to the series, this is definitely worth the playthrough. But what do you think? Did Mega Man 5 deserve an entry on this list? Do you plan on giving Mega Man 5 a shot? Or have you played before? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Released in 1992, Wolfenstein 3D changed the gaming world forever. Developed by ID Software, who would later go on to make classics like Doom, this groundbreaking first-person shooter put players in the boots of BJ Blountzy, an allied spy, on a mission to escape from Castle Wolfenstein and take down the Nazi regime. Unlike anything that had ever came before it, Wolfenstein 3D offered a fast-paced, action-packed experience with smooth first-person movement and intense gunplay, armed with weapons like a pistol, machine gun, and the devastating chain gun. Players blasted their way through hordes of enemies, navigating through labyrinth corridors filled with secrets, treasures, and life-saving supplies. It's simple, but effective. The gameplay loop of shooting, exploring, and surviving was an instant hit, laying down the foundation for the first-person shooter genre as we know it today. One of Wolfenstein 3D's most defining features was its level design, which encouraged exploring and it rewarded curiosity. Each map was packed with hidden doors and secret rooms containing extra ammo, health, and even more powerful weapons, making every playthrough feel fresh and rewarding. Game's enemy variety, from the basic guards to the elite SS officers and monstrous bosses, kept the combat engaging, while the adrenaline-pumping soundtrack and immersive sound effects heightened the tension. The pixelated visuals may seem outdated today, but at the time, Wolfenstein 3D delivered an experience that felt fast and fluid and exhilarating, something rarely seen on PCs of the early 90s. Without Wolfenstein 3D, and I say this again, without Wolfenstein 3D and the innovations of ID Software, we wouldn't have hits such as Doom and Quake today and the whole modern FPS genre, making it one of the most important, influential video games of its time. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Check it out. There are stories that define a genre, tales woven so intricately into the fabric of gaming history that it becomes more than just pixels on a screen. They become legends. Today, we journey back into 1992, obviously, to a world where destiny is written across generations. This is Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride, a masterpiece of storytelling, gameplay, and emotional depth, hidden within the unassuming confines of the early 90s RPG era. It begins as many stories do, with innocence, adventure, and the promise of a bright future. You are but a child, traveling with your father, Panaraz, a warrior of unwavering strength and a mysterious purpose. The world of Dragon Quest V is not the kind as to allow a childhood to last forever. Unlike its predecessors, Dragon Quest V dares to be more than a simple tale of heroism. It is a generational saga, and an odyssey spanning decades, where you, the player, do not simply save the world. You grow within it. You live its tragedies, its joys, and its choices. This is where your childhood ends, a moment forever seared into the hearts of players who bore witness to it, the loss of Panraz. This is not just the loss of your father. It is the death of innocence. In the era where RPG protagonists were often destined heroes, you are powerless here, helpless, taken into slavery. Your fate is no longer yours to decide. And this begins the second act of your life. When at last you escape, the world has changed, the towns have grown, and the people have moved on, and yet you remain a man without a past. But what Dragon Quest V does next is truly remarkable. It allows you to forge your own future. Bianca or Neri? A question that echoes through the annals of RPG history. Few choices in gaming have carried such an emotional weight, unlike a simple morality decision. This is not about good or evil, it is just about love, about duty, and about the life you wish to build. And no matter what choice you make, the game never tells you that you're right or wrong, only that the journey continues. But this is no fairy tale. There is no peaceful ever after. Your wife is taken, and once more you're powerless to stop fate's cruel hand. Turned to stone, you are left as nothing more than a relic of the past while the world moves forward without you. Years pass, decades even, and when at last you awaken, the world has once again changed, but they're waiting for you. Are your children your legacy? And so the cycle is complete. A boy who lost everything now stands as a father, a hero not by prophecy, but by perseverance. Together with your children, you confront a darkness not because fate demands it, but because you choose to as the player. Few games have ever dared to tell a story so personal, so deeply human. Dragon Quest V is not just about a triumph of good over evil, it's about life itself. It's about growth, loss, and love, and the unbreakable balance of family. And in the end, when the credits roll and the journey comes to the close, you are left with something greater than victory. You're left with a life well lived. Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride, released in 1992 for the Super Famicom, is often held as one of the most emotional, impactful RPGs ever made. Unlike its predecessors, which focused on grand adventures and legendary heroes, Dragon Quest V took a turn. It told a deeply personal story spanning multiple generations. Players followed through a protagonist from childhood to adulthood, witnessing his struggles, his triumphs, his losses along the way. The game uniquely lets you experience major life events, growing up, falling in love, starting a family, and even raising children, making it one of the most immersive RPG narratives of all time. This heartfelt approach, combined with the series' signature turn-based combat and charming world design, makes Dragon Quest V a truly special entry in the franchise, and probably one of the best in my opinion. One of the biggest gameplay innovations in Dragon Quest V was the introduction of the monster recruitment system, a feature that predated Pokemon by several years. Instead of only relying on human party members, players could befriend monsters they encountered in battle, train them, and build a custom party. This mechanic added a new layer of strategy, as different monsters had unique abilities and strengths, making a team competition more engaging than ever before. The battle system itself remains true to the classic Dragon Quest turn-based mechanics, and fell deeper due to the variety of available party members. Whether you're using powerful monsters or fighting alongside family members, combat in Dragon Quest V felt dynamic and rewarding. Beyond its gameplay, Dragon Quest V is most memorable for its emotional storytelling. The game doesn't tell a story of just good versus evil. It's a personal journey filled with losses, perseverance, and love. This emphasis on generational storytelling made the game truly unique, as players just didn't fight to save the world, they built a legacy. The way the game seamlessly transitions from childhood innocence to adult responsibilities gave the game an emotional depth that few RPGs had even achieved at the time, and even decades later. Despite not being officially released in the West until years later, it remains one of the most beloved entries in the franchise. This combination of the monster recruitment system, generational storytelling, and rich world building cemented its legacy as a masterpiece in the genre. Whether you're a longtime Dragon Quest fan or new to the series, Dragon Quest V is an unforgettable journey that every RPG lover should experience at least once. And I suggest, if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Go check it out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist, released in 1992 for the Sega Genesis, was Konami's attempt to bring the arcade-style beat-em-up action of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise to Sega fans. While often compared to Turtles in Time for the NES, Hyperstone Heist isn't just a simple port, it's a reimagined experience featuring a mix of remixed levels, faster gameplay, and darker visual tones. This story follows the Turtles as they take on Shredder once again, who has stolen the mysterious Hyperstone, a powerful artifact capable of shrinking entire cities. With its arcade-style action, fast combat, and couch co-op gameplay, Hyperstone Heist became a must-play for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans on the Genesis. One of the biggest changes in Hyperstone Heist was its pacing compared to Turtles in Time. The game plays much faster, enemies are more aggressive, attacks feel more quicker, and the overall combat is snappier. The level design pulls elements of Turtles in Time, but reorganizes them into longer, more challenging stages. Players fight through familiar environments like a burning New York City and Shredder's hideout, but with extended layers and more relentless enemy encounters. The combat remains classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle beat-em-up action, with each turtle having their own unique animations and fighting styles. While the infamous time-traveling gimmick from Turtles in Time is absent, Hyperstone Heist makes up for it with its intense enemy encounters and streamlined action-packed experience. Despite its strengths, Hyperstone Heist has been criticized for its shorter length and smaller roster of bosses. Compared to Turtles in Time, the game features only 5 stages, meaning players can complete it fairly quick, especially in co-op mode. However, the tougher enemy AI and more aggressive boss fights help balance the experience, ensuring that players remain engaged from start to finish. The Hyperstone Heist remains a fantastic beat-em-up, offering Sega fans a fast, action-packed adventure with the Turtles that still hold up today. And I suggest, if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Released in 1992 for the Game Boy, Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins was a massive leap forward from its predecessors. Unlike the first Super Mario Land, which had simpler arcade feel to it, this sequel introduced a larger, more open world with non-linear structures. Players could tackle the game's 6 zones in any order they choose, each featuring its own unique theme, from the eerie pumpkin zone to the space-fearing thrills of the Space Zone. The game also introduced Wario as Mario's new nemesis, adding an interesting twist to the usual rescue the princess formula in the Super Mario franchise. With bigger sprites, smoother animations, and more refined platforming mechanics, Super Mario Land 2 felt more in line with the classic console Mario games, despite being on the Game Boy. Another major highlight of Super Mario Land 2 was its creative level design and fun power-ups. The game introduced the Bunny Mario power-up, which let Mario glide through the air, adding a new layer of movement and strategy. Hidden secrets and alternate paths encourage players to explore, making each zone feel fresh and exciting. The improved graphics and sound pushed the Game Boy's hardware to the limit, delivering a visually rich experience that still holds up today with its charming world and non-linear progression. And the introduction of Wario makes Super Mario Land 2 6 golden coins remain one of the best and most unique Mario titles to ever grace a handheld system. And if you haven't played this all-time classic yet, I definitely do suggest go check it out.
Meanwhile, we have the 6th coin, which means we've gotten to the end of the game. Excellent, excellent.
Released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo, Contra 3 The Alien Wars took the fast-paced running gun action of the classic Contra series and cranked it up to a whole nother level. Set in a war-torn future, players control Bill and Lance as they battle against a full-scale alien invasion, blasting through 6 adrenaline-pumping stages filled with daily enemies, massive explosions, and some of the most intense boss battles of the 16-bit era. The game introduced significant graphical and gameplay enhancements over the NES predecessors, utilizing the SNES Mode 7 effects for rotating top-down levels and massive screen-filling bosses. With responsive controls and co-op gameplay and non-stop action, Contra 3 quickly became a standout title on the Super Nintendo. One of the biggest improvements in Contra 3 was its expanded arsenal and refined mechanics. Players could now carry and switch between 2 different weapons, adding a new layer of strategy to combat. The game also introduced powerful new weapons like the flamethrower and the homing missiles, making it more satisfying to mow down alien hordes. Some levels featured thrilling vehicle sections, such as the riding futuristic motorcycles while dodging enemy fire or hanging from missiles mid-air. The addition of the top-down perspective levels added a variety, although they were diverse among players due to their different movement styles. Regardless, Contra 3 delivered a non-stop, high-energy action that tested players' reflexes and skills at every turn. Though the game is notorious for its punishing challenge, basically its difficulty, but for those who mastered its fast-paced combat, were rewarded with one of the most exhilarating action experiences of the early 90s. Contra 3 remains a cult classic, proving that sometimes all you need is a gun, quick reflexes, and an unstoppable will to survive. And I definitely suggest, if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do check it out. Released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo, Super Mario Kart wasn't just another racing game. It was a genre-defining masterpiece that introduced the world of kart racing as we know it today. Unlike traditional racing games at the time, Super Mario Kart infused classic Mario charm with tight arcade-style driving, power-ups, and competitive gameplay. The game featured 8 iconic characters, each with their own handling and speed, racing through 20 tracks that spread across different cups. The Mode 7 graphics gave the tracks a pseudo 3D look, making each race feel dynamic and immersive. Whether you're drifting through Bowser's castle or dodging hazards in Ghost Valley, every course was packed with personality and challenge. Beyond its addictive single-player Grand Prix mode, Super Mario Kart truly shined in multiplayer. Screen racing let friends go head-to-head, but the real game changer was the battle mode. Instead of racing to finish, players engaged in strategic showdowns using items like red shells and banana peels to pop their opponent's balloons. This competitive and unpredictable gameplay added endless replay value and set the stage for the future of Mario Kart titles. With its smooth controls, charming tracks, and innovative mechanics, Super Mario Kart laid down the foundation for one of Nintendo's most beloved franchises and remains a must-play and a classic to this day. And I suggest, if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do check it out. Released in 1992 for the Sega Genesis, Streets of Rage 2 is often considered the pinnacle of the beat-em-up genre. This sequel improved on every aspect of the original game, featuring a larger, more detailed sprite, smoother animations, and a deeper combat system. Players could choose from 4 distinct fighters. Axel and Blaze return alongside 2 newcomers, Max Thunder, a powerhouse wrestler, and Skate, a fast, agile fighter on rollerblades. Each character had their own fighting styles and special moves, making combat feel more strategic and rewarding. The enemy variety also expanded, introducing unique goons, bikers, and powerful bosses, ensuring that each stage felt fresh and exciting. Level design in Streets of Rage 2 was also another major highlight, taking players through the neon and soaked cityscapes, underground fight clubs, and even an amusement park filled with deadly surprises. Unlike the first game, the sequel removed the police car super attack and instead gave each character their own special move, which added more depth to combat. Co-op mode made the experience even more engaging, allowing players to team up and unleash devastating combos on waves of enemies. The controls are smooth and responsive, making every punch and kick and throw feel satisfying. The enemy AI was also improved, requiring players to stay on their toes and use different tactics to overcome stronger foes. Of course, no discussion, Streets of Rage 2 would not be complete without mentioning its legendary soundtrack. Composed by Yuzo Koshiro, the music blended electronic, house, and techno beats, creating an immersive atmosphere that perfectly matched the game's gritty, yet stylish aesthetic. The game's final showdown against Mr. X was an intense conclusion, putting player skills to the ultimate test with refined combat, incredible co-op experience, and one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Streets of Rage 2 remains an undisputed all-time classic, and it stands out as one of the greatest games to ever release on the Sega Genesis. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Go check it out. Released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time is a definitive example of the beat-em-up genre, delivering a fast-paced, action-packed experience that still holds as one of the best games in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series today. This sequel to the arcade hit Turtles in Time takes the Turtles on a time-traveling adventure through various areas, from prehistoric times to distant futures, all while trying to stop Shredder and the Krang from rewriting history itself. The game introduced several gameplay improvements over its arcade counterpart, including trigger controls, better graphics, and more interactive environments. Classic arcade action was elevated by a beautifully colorful world and dynamic engaging stages that kept the gameplay feeling fresh and fun throughout the adventure. One of the most exciting aspects of Turtles in Time was its variety of levels, which took players through uniquely themed environments. Each time period felt distinct, from battling on pirate ships to facing off against robotic enemies in the future. The game also allowed players to execute powerful special moves, including the iconic throw-over enemy at the screen mechanic, which never gets old. Co-op play was a huge part of the fun, letting friends team up and work together to defeat enemies and take down gigantic bosses, including fan favorites like Slash, Bebop, and Rocksteady. The fast-paced combat combined with creative level design and a catchy soundtrack made Turtles in Time not only one of the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, but one of the most entertaining beat-em-ups of the 16-bit era. Despite its arcade origins, Turtles in Time shines even more on the SNES thanks to its optimized gameplay and smooth controls. The game is incredibly fun, both in single-player and multiplayer modes, offering a perfect balance of difficulty and accessibility. The bosses are big and challenging, with each one offering a unique fight that keeps players on their toes. The combination of great level design, fluid animation, and cooperative play solidify Turtles in Time as one of the all-time greats in the beat-em-up genre. Whether you're a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or you simply are a lover of the classic 16-bit action, the game is a must-play and that still holds up as a nostalgic masterpiece today. In 1992, the video game industry was in the middle of a war. Battle for the living rooms, for loyalty, and for dominance. And at the heart of this fight, one blue hedgehog was leading the charge. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was not just another sequel. It was a statement. Sega had a mission to prove that Sonic wasn't a one-hit wonder, that the Genesis was the console to own, and that speed, attitude, and innovation could dethrone the mighty Mario. This wasn't just a game. This was a revolution. Bigger, faster, and better. Sonic the Hedgehog took everything that made the original Smash hit a hit and cranked it up to 11. The addition of Tails, Sonic's faithful sidekick, introduced a new layer of gameplay, allowing cooperative play for the first time. The levels more complex and more thrilling, and filled with hidden secrets, and the introduction of the now iconic Spin Dash. which gave Sonic a greater sense of momentum, making it clear that this was an evolution of platforming. The game's pacing was relentless, the music electric, and the visuals a dazzling showcase of what the Genesis could do. This just wasn't another Sonic game, this was the Sonic game. And it worked. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 became the best-selling Genesis game of all time, a juggernaut that solidified Sega's place in history. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about the impact. The game defined the cool factor, and that made Sega the rebellious alternative to Nintendo's family-friendly image. It gave Genesis an identity, a mascot that truly could compete with the plumber. In the grand war of the 90s, Sonic 2 was more than just a sequel. It was a weapon, a cultural phenomenon, and a turning point in the console wars and in video game history. The Blue Bird wasn't just keeping pace anymore. He was leading the race. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Go check it out. By 1992, Square had already established itself as a master of storytelling in the RPG genre. With Final Fantasy IV, they pushed the boundaries of narrative-driven gaming, crafting an epic filled with tragedy, redemption, and unforgettable characters. But Square was not content with simply telling another story. With Final Fantasy V, they sought to redefine gameplay itself, to create an RPG that rewarded creativity, strategy, and mastery. The result was a game that could become one of the most mechanically innovative in the series, and yet, despite its brilliance, it would remain hidden from the Western audience for years to come. At first glance, Final Fantasy V seemed to follow the classic formula: expansive world, elemental crystals, a looming darkness threatening to consume everything, but beneath its familiar exterior lies a game that dared to be different. It was a tale of destiny, defiance. As the winds have ceased to blow, the seas have grown violent, and the earth itself trembles. Something ancient, something powerful is steering, and fate has brought together four unlikely heroes. Arts, the wandering adventurer, content with his carefree life, with no kingdom to protect but a heart full of curiosity, until fate pulls him into a journey he never expected. Princess Lena, bounded by duty and the legacy of her father, seeking to protect the crystals no matter the cost. Goloff, an old man with a past clouded in mystery memories he cannot recall, and yet his instincts tell him he's fought this battle before. And Ferris, a fierce pirate captain whose past is entangled with royal blood. Bounded all by fate, yet driven by their own choices, a simple quest to protect the crystals would soon unravel a greater evil beyond comprehension. At the heart of this calamity lies a force unlike anything the world has ever faced, unlike past antagonists in Final Fantasy. X-Death is not a tragic figure. He's not a fallen hero, nor is he a man driven by misguided ideals. X-Death is destruction incarnated, a force of chaos that seeks to unmake the world itself. He is pure malevolence, born from the darkest magics ever, and being obsessed with harnessing the power of the void to erase existence itself. His presence is suffocating. His cruelty is unmatched. Where previous Final Fantasy villains manipulated or schemed, X-Death struck with brute force, crushing all who stood in his way. While the story of Final Fantasy V is one of heroism and sacrifice, its true legacy lies in its groundbreaking gameplay. The job system, it wasn't just another feature, it was a revolution. Players could freely switch between over 20 different jobs, each with its own unique abilities. Players could master them to create powerful hybrids. While previous entries in the series locked characters into predetermined roles, Final Fantasy V introduced us to a new level of freedom. Mechanic allowed for unparalleled customization. A black mage who could wield a knight sword, or a ninja who could heal with white magic, or a berserker who could cast spells. This meant that no two playthroughs were ever the same. A warrior today could be a summoner tomorrow, blending skills in ways never seen before in the RPG genre. The depth of this system turned battle into a strategic playground, rewarding creativity and experimentation. But with freedom came challenge. Final Fantasy V wasn't just a game that you held in your hand. Its enemies were relentless, its bosses unpredictable. Players had to think, adapt, and master the intricacies of the job system to survive. And yet, this difficulty wasn't a barrier, it was an innovation. Every battle, every new skill learned, every job mastered felt like a personal triumph. And for those who dared to push themselves, Final Fantasy V delivered some of the most rewarding experiences in RPG history. Victory didn't come easy, but when it did, it was unforgettable. The journey of Final Fantasy V was one of sacrifice, courage, and resilience. The world had been saved, but at the cost, our heroes walked away, forever changed. So, too are the players who embarked on this journey with them. Despite its innovations, Final Fantasy V was never released outside of Japan in its original era. Western audiences were left in the dark, relying on rumors, reported copies, and fan translations. Square deemed the game too complex for North American players, believing its intricate mechanics would be too overwhelming. But fans refused to let this game remain a lost legend. In the late 90s, the first unofficial English translation of Final Fantasy V would emerge, allowing Western players to finally experience what they had been missing. And when the game was officially released years later on the PlayStation and Game Boy Advance, it became crystal clear why this was not just a forgotten entry, but one of the most mechanically rich RPGs ever created. In the grand legacy of Final Fantasy, some titles stand as milestones. Final Fantasy is one of them. It is a game that redefined what it meant to play an RPG, a game that rewarded the bold, the strategic, the creative. It may have taken years for this world to fully embrace it, but now its place in history is undeniable. And so, the story of Final Fantasy V lives on, not as a lost legend, but as one of the greatest adventures ever told. And I suggest if you haven't played this all-time classic, that y'all definitely do. Go. Check it out. And that's a wrap on tonight's deep dive into gaming history. We hope you enjoyed this journey through time with us, exploring the games that shaped the industry and left a lasting impact on the world of gaming. If you love taking a stroll down memory lane or discovering hidden gems, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a history lesson from Nostalgic Nights. So, did these games deserve an entry on our list? Do you have a favorite game from 1992? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, keep gaming.